Very good. Okay. So last week we were finishing up, and I think we did finish up to the Mishnah on Daf Mem Amid Beis. So we completed that sugya, and this was a interesting sugya of what the halacha is between two people who trade in business, whether it's dry goods or wet goods. How much of a percentage do you have to take off for instance, in the case of wine and oil, for sediment, or for scum, or for the shrinkage? It's about shrinkage is what we're talking about, but it's an interesting thing because inherent in all of this is the understanding that the amount of shrinkage is really the amount of profit, which I find, I mean, again, that's a tremendous finish here, that's all he's making. That all he's making is the amount that he doesn't have to give back because the product has shrunk in size. So, but anyway, so we finished that Mishnah, and now we're on to the Mishnah on Daf Mem Omid Beis on the bottom, turning a little bit to a different topic. Says the Mishnah, now we're talking about two people who are acting sort of in the class of a shomer or a shayol or whatever, one of the four categories that we talk about, Shabbat Shabbat Hamafkid Chavis Eitzel Chavero Lo Yachtov Lo Balim Mokom. For instance, I give Menashe a chavis. I say, do me a favor, hold this chavis for me, or Shem Echinam, hold this chavis for me because I'm going out of town, but I'm not telling you where to put it. You have obviously a warehouse, or you have a place in your garage. I'd like you to take this from me and put it down, but I'm not telling you where to put it. You put it where you think it'll be safe. Generally speaking. The tiltala v'nishbara, and the chavius was moved and it broke. So now the question is, under what circumstance it broke? When did it break? Did it break in the moving, or did it break after he put it down in the place where he was going to designate? We'll see in a minute. The tiltal of a nishbra, im mitoch yado nishbra, if it broke because he was doing something with it of his own hand, for instance, l'tzorcho chayiv. If he was handling it for his own business, because he said, you know what, I could use something from this barrel, I'll replace it later. As an example, he was going to borrow something from it, which, by the way, I mean, we classify that really as Geneva. I mean, it goes so far as to say that he was converting it. But even if he wasn't actually converting it, he was just moving it for his own purpose, chayiv, l'tzorcha, pater. But if it was strictly for the benefit of the barrel, because he had originally, let's say, put the barrel in a place and said, I don't like this here, it's too tight, it's right next to a passageway that I go in and out, I need to move it. Then if it's strictly for the benefit of the barrel, then pater. All right, so we have a couple of variances here, but the overarching point of this part of the Mishnah is lo yachtiv lo balim moket. Is the owner did not designate a place. He let the shomer designate where it went. So it says Rashi lo yachtiv lo balim mokem, but beis shomer lo zavizu hishliani, where he says, I'm borrowing this corner. He did not do that. So he did not designate a place. Says Rashi, for his purpose, then he's chayiv, says the Mishnah, it was in a very tight place, and it was near breakage because it was being, I don't know, people were walking by all the time, whatever the reason. so he was doing it for the benefit of the barrel, then he's potter. So that's the general principle of the Mishnah in the first iteration, in the first portion. Now, we move on, second part of the Mishnah. Im shehanicha nishbara. Let's say, again, he did not designate a place, but he said, I said to you, Menashe, you take it, and now you put it down. Im shehanicha, you put it down. You found a nice place for it. You say, this place is going to be safe. But you put it down there, and lo and behold, nishbara. It breaks in the place that you put it down that you thought it was safe. Nothing to do with me, because I put it in your hands. And it broke. Says the Mishnah, bein letzorcho, bein letzorcha, potter. Doesn't matter if it was for his purpose that he put it or for the benefit of the barrel. It's potter. Why? Because it's mishahanicha, where he's already returned, but he's already put it in a resting place, in a place where it should be safe. So in a minute, we're going to be talking about what's the thread here, but
there could be, I'm sure they'll talk about such things, but there could be, they're safe and they're safe. You take the thing, you put it down on the floor off to the side, it's on a stable floor, it should be safe, etc. On the other half, you put it somewhere where somebody might stumble over it, maybe it wouldn't be, even though it's, in a sense, it's safe because it's not on a pot, falling off a shelf.
Right, right. So take a look. Rashi says, "Im b'shehanicha." He already put it down. Shekila tashmisha b'shiva b'mokam mishtamer bein shetiltala betchila letzorcho bein shetiltala letzorcho potter. In other words, he took it. And he moved it. He moved it for his, I moved it, let's say I'm the other one. So I moved it for my purpose. I moved it for the purpose of the barrel. I did all kinds of things with it. But I then found a place, and I completed the movements and I put it in a place which I felt was a good, safe place, right? Then I'm potter. Then I'm potter. So in other words, it's kind of, where did it wind up? It doesn't matter what I did from the time you gave it to me to the time I put it down. I could have actually used it a little bit or not used it. And then you might argue, well, if he used it, then maybe he's a different kind of person. His status is different. Says the Mishnah that once he puts it down, everything is forgiven. Whatever he did in the past doesn't matter. He put it down. He has now found a safe place for it. And even if he had moved it for his own purpose, does not matter. Okay, that's a caveat that the Mishnah puts in here. We'll see how that plays out. Now we're going to get to the third part of the Mishnah. And in this part of the Mishnah, Yachda lo bala mokum. Okay, so now we're going to insert.
Excuse me, Rabbi.
Yes.
Before we go on to the third part, we're talking here so far about things that are in a person's head. There's no visible way to determine which motive he had.
Right.
This is kind of different than.
Right. No, I mean, look, in the example here that he gives, let's say he had a motive to use this from the time that the owner, that I gave it into the hands of Menashe, then the initial intent was, this is perfect for me. I can use this. I can do this with that. I can do that with that. Again, if something happens in the breakage in the course of that, that's where the Mishnah says, it's as if he's a ganef. That's the notion of the Mepharshim say he's a ganef because he has no right to utilize the property and he used it for his own purpose. So it's geneva. But
for example, if it's a barrel standing vertically, it's not unusual for somebody to put something on top of it. Maybe that made it tip over, whatever. But the point is that this whole mission is starting off with what's going on in the donor's head.
Right. So the owner only wants shmira. He just wants shmira. And he says, it doesn't matter to me what you do with it. As long as you keep it safe for me, I'm okay. So the latitude is with the receiver, in this case, Menashe, to do what he wants with it. As long as Menashe is going to do something that's going to keep it safe, then I don't care. He may have a big warehouse. I'm not going to start telling him, put it, on row 3, space 11, whatever it happens to be. That's not where I am. I'm just saying, you take it from me and you take care of it. When I come back, it'll be safe and sound. So up until now, the Baalim have been sort of hand off, and they haven't made too many demands. They've just said, hold it for me. So the Mishnah is telling us that now it depends on utilization, whether the barrel was utilized once it was handed off from me to Menashe, whether or not he used it or just completely just put it in a safe place and forgot about it like all the other hundreds of barrels he has, or whatever. And we see that it can change stature, because if I give it and Menashe uses it, he's putting himself at risk. As long as he's at risk, he could be responsible. Once that risk is off, because he's now found a place and that's a safe place, anything that happened before is no longer germane to the outcome of the barrel. If the barrel later breaks, then you can't kind of, oh, but he used it. So if he used it, he should somehow have liability. No, there's no liability once it's put into that safe place. Okay, says the Mishnah, I came in, I said, you know what? I see a space over there on line 3, and it's space number 11. That's the one I want. If I designated the actual place, the tiltala v'nishbara, and it was moved, it was jostled, whatever, v'nishbara, and it broke. So now I'm the one who made the decision to put it there, not Menashe. So then, bein mitoch yado, bein b'shehanicha, whether it broke in his hand or after it was already placed in slot 11 where I wanted it, says the Mishnah, l'tzorcho chayiv, l'tzorcho, he's always chayiv. Even after he put it down, he's chayiv because he used it. Tzorcho potter. But if the movement was only l'tzorech, the barrel, then he's potter. So we see a couple of things from this. We see that from this Mishnah, there is a difference between designation and non. And that's going to be an interesting point, because if you look at the last Rashi before the Gemara, and then the last Rashi of the Mishnah, the Gemara parach ma'ishno lo yachtav v'yachtav. What's the real difference between designating and not designating? In other words, Rashi had that in mind when the Mishnah made this difference that we're learning here between yachtav and lo yachtav. Rashi wants to eclair, Rashi wants to raise that issue so that we're already thinking about it. What difference does it make? If at the end, if the outcome was that it was in a secure place and it was in a place where it couldn't be broken, then why should it matter if it was designated or not? There must be some reason why it would matter if the Baal designated it, if at the end it was sort of in a secure place and had been broken. And that's really what we're trying to understand, is what that distinction is. All right, so that's the Mishnah here, giving us, and by the way, this is a very this is germane to us today, because today we have people who store things, who have warehouses and they store, and the general principle is whether or not the obligation lies on the person who is holding the object to keep it safe, and what are those obligations? In other words, if he moves it, if he doesn't move it in the course of it being there, if the owner said I want it there, and then it winds up in another place, but it's a safe place. But the owner said no, I wanted it here, and it wound up somewhere else. So these are all could be very practical questions for us today, but nevertheless, there's going to be some chilik. Rashi even hints to that question. Okay. That's the Mishnah, the opening Mishnah. Now, let's get into the Gemara. Let's understand what's going on here. It says the Gemara on the bottom of Man Omid Beis. Hi, Mani Rabbi Yishmael. There is a machlokes between two Amaroim Rav Yishmael and Rav Akiva, as to, in other words, the underlying principle. What's the underlying principle of this Mishnah that that we need to understand? So it says the Gemara, Hi Mani Rabbi Yishmael, that this is the Mishnah is like Rabbi Yishmael. The Omar lo be'inan das bala. Okay, fine. Now we're getting somewhere. Now we're going to get to a point where we're going to understand why this discussion is even germane, and that is, do we need das bala? What does das bala mean? Das bala means that when I give Menashe something to hold, have I completely given away my rights to what goes on there? As long as I come back in a month and I pick up my item and I walk away, I'm happy. In other words, is that what it means? Or is there something inherent in my mind that I need to be informed of things that happen to my barrel while it's by Menashe? In other words, is it, okay, you take it, I have nothing to do with it, I'm not worrying about it. Whatever you do, you move it, you don't move it, whatever you do. Or is it, no, it looks that way, but Menashe really has to consult with me when things are happening because I did not relinquish total control. That's really what the machlokes is. And Haimani Rabbi Shmuel ba'amar lo be'inin das bala. He takes the very open view that when I turn something over to Menashe and I'm entrusting him, I'm out. You don't have to ask me, you don't have to consult with me, you're the balabos, you take care of it. Just make sure I get back my whole barrel and I'm good with it. So obviously Rabbi Kiva doesn't take that position. But we say hi Mani, says Rashi, hi Mani hodik dani ratio. That what we say in the ratio of the Mishnah. That if when he put it down, he already put it in the same place it broke, even though he originally used it for his own purpose. So you might think, oh, wait a minute, he converted it for his own purpose? That's not kosher. That's not okay. He's got to be responsible because the nifga, the person who is you, Menashe, I didn't give you permission that you should be able to use it for your own benefit. So now that you did, l'chayre, you should later on have you broke the string of my trust with you, and you should be chayiv. So Rashi says, according to Mishmuel, afal pi shel mitchila potter. No, you're potter. Why? Because once you return it to its place, and it wasn't damaged when you did it for your own purpose. While you were using it, let's say you used it to step on to get to the next level, to be able to see what's on level 2 of the warehouse. So you stepped on the barrel, which means you used it, right? Okay. Did you break some kind of chain here that all of a sudden you have responsibility? Says Rashi, according to Rabbi Shmuel, once you step back down and it wasn't broken, nothing happened. You don't need das balim. You don't need me to know that you stepped on it and broke the chain, and then when you stepped down, everything was kosher. In other words, it's all in your hands. You're responsible. So Rashi says, and you're still a shomer chinam, upotter al oinsa. And if there was an accident that happened, we know that a shomer chinam is potter al oines. He does not chayiv. Even though you didn't write me a letter or give me a phone call and tell me not to serve a hechzarka. Oh, by the way, you know what, Tuvia, I did step on your barrel and I used it for my purposes and I was able to accomplish what I needed. You didn't do that. Still, have a hashava, Rabbi Shmuel, it's still considered a full return, and that's Rabbi Shmuel's position. So Rabbi Shmuel really takes the position that the nifkan is the balabos, and that there is not the need to consult with the owner while it's in possession. Blank check, it's yours, just make sure it gets back to me. That's Rabbi Shmuel. Says the Gemara that that's who the Manda Omar of our Mishnah is. Now, think about this for a minute. And I won't get ahead of ourselves because this is the whole discussion. What's the first part of our Mishnah? The first part of the Mishnah, V'lo yachtiv lo ba'alim mocha. The Baal did not designate a place. So the Baal didn't designate a place. Menashe is the nifka. He's got the total run of the place. He uses it. When he uses it, he converted it to himself. So maybe there should be something here that should make him achroi. You should be chayiv. And then he finishes using it, puts it back in its place. A couple of days later, bingo, something happens. Now, you have to confess and say, okay, what happened since I gave it to you? Well, day one, I did this. Day two, I did this. And it's going to come back and say, well, wait a minute, you used it while I was gone. Isn't there some kind of a transference here that you should be responsible for me? Says Rabbi Shmuel, you are shomer chinam because you put it back in its place. It's as if it never happened. It's as if you didn't use it. That usage has nothing to do with the breakage. And as a shomer chinam, you're potter. I have no time to you. If I didn't have insurance, I'm out of luck. Right? Because remember, keep in mind, in the beginning of the Mishnah, lo yachtov. And the question is that going to be germane? Is because I didn't say to you, put it in that particular corner. All I said is, take it, find a place for it, keep it safe, and I'll get it back. Anyway, keep that in mind because part of the discussion may center around the fact of whether or not I did more than just give it to you. I gave it to you with a purpose, with a location, etc. But right now, no location, nothing. We hold like Rabbi Shmuel, you're good, fine.
So implied in shomer chinam, there's still plenty of responsibilities left.
Very basic. Very basic. Shomer chinam has very basic. As long as he keeps his nose.
He has to return it in the same condition.
He's got to return it. He's not chayiv in oinus. He's not chayiv in anything that happened to that jug. Not his responsibility. He's just there to make sure that he didn't do something improper. Now, the fact that he may have stepped on it or done something with it, that's not in the chain of what happened for the breakage. Yes, he did something. So you might think that once he did, he broke all the rules. Mishnah say, so he broke no rules. He used it. It came back into its normal state, right? The state of where it was in the beginning. And that's the chiddush, that he doesn't have to consult with the owner, right? That's what what Rashi stands in the chiddush is that because he does not have to along the way tell me, oh, by the way, I stepped on it, I used it, I opened it up. None of that is material. If it's not material, as long as I get back my hobbies, I'm fine. And if something happens to it in the normal course when it's in a safe place, the fact that there was a blip of an interruption because you did something with it, does not wipe out your good record vis-a-vis returning it to me. Okay.
Rabbi. So I know we haven't heard Rabbi Akiva's position yet, but does halacha consider the concept of gross negligence versus regular negligence?
In a way, yes, but not germane to here. No. So if what you're getting at here is not going to make a distinction. In other words, the fact that he was negligent as opposed to gross negligent isn't. In other words, one doesn't weigh more heavily on the other in this principle. Okay, that's what you're getting at. Is that okay? He didn't.
But in this,
he didn't.
I hear you. But in this
case,
you don't know the strength of the barrel. But for use it to climb, that was not its intended purpose.
Right.
So it was convenient for you, and then you caused the damage unintentionally, but by not paying attention to what it was. So it seems like, I know in common law, we have that distinction, and I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but I just want to know how the Torah compares that in this situation. You're saying it's not relevant.
Because what you're hinting at is what we would call contributory negligence.
Exactly.
In other words, you have each party is a little bit guilty because I did something that might have affected I wasn't the makabapatish, I wasn't the cause of the damage, but maybe I did something along the way that may have contributed to the damage later. The answer is that the Gemara does not recognize that contributory negligence, because once the Gemara says that you took it out of harm's way, even if you did a little something there, that taking it out of harm's way and putting it back into its original state wipes out the harm's way, right? So for this purpose, your question is good, but there's no contributory negligence where we're going to say, oh, he was 10% negligent because he did this, this, and this. Right? Now, the question would be different, Michael, and this is not what the Gemara is asking, but if the point of all of this was that he weakened the barrel, in other words, we have, let's say, a sugya where you have a barrel and you beat on it and you do things and this, that, the other, and at the end, let's say the barrel just can't withstand any more, weight or whatever, and breaks. Then you're going to ask, is the fact that you did something with it, even though once it broke, it was in a safe place and had there was no reason for it to have broken. The teretz is maybe there was, because all of the stress and everything that you did along the way, this was kind of like the final straw. You didn't need much to push it over the end. That's a different set of circumstances for which you're right. There would be a balancing of how much his actions contributed to the damage. But in our simple case, it's a simple case of the Gemara is not looking behind what happened to the barrel. The Gemara is just saying the barrel was in a safe place. Yes, you jeopardized it somewhere along the way, but you then unjeopardized it because you took away the risk by putting it where it could not have been, it wasn't risky. So you did everything that you had to do. So now you're a shomer chinam, key word. Whatever you were before, whether you were a shoel or whatever you were, you're categorized now as a shomer chinam. Simply, you got no wages. You did me a favor, Menashe. You took it, you put it there, and all of a sudden it gets damaged. I have no time to you, even if along the way, the tzarcho, you used it for no reason. Why? Because Rabbi Shmuel says that you, Menashe, have total latitude. You don't have to ask my permission for anything. You didn't have to call me up and say, oh, by the way, I'm moving it from line A to line B into slot 11. Is that okay with you? No, you didn't have to do that, and therefore you're the balabos.
But Rabbi, maybe I misunderstood you. You said he used it to climb.
Let's say he used it for his purpose.
And
right.
A barrel is meant to hold something. It's not, while it may have been used in those times, it wasn't intended that he use it to climb on to reach a higher level.
I just gave one example. Another example could have been that he opened up the lid and took something out and then replaced it. Let's say it had some stuff in it that he needed at the time, and he took it and it looked like Geneva, but then he replaced it with something of similar kind, so that it was a wash. That's only one example.
But I think the climbing is a good example. It may or may not be correct here, but I think it's a good example because let's say it's the type of barrel that's not designed to be stacked and therefore climbed on and so on. Then you could say, oh, if you research everything, you'd say this was negligence, and the response would be, okay, I was negligent that day, but the next day it was back, it was safe, it was the right place, and everything else.
That's right. So I took it out of harm's way. I took it out of the negligence. So that's the point here. The point is what happens in the interim, whether it was negligence or whether I borrowed something from it or I used it, that doesn't take away from my being the one to make the decision, and I made the decision. So I made it whole again, and therefore No harm, no foul, as we like to say, right?
But you don't know if it weakened the barrel.
Right, but we're not talking here in that kind of circumstance where there's contributory negligence, where my act would have caused the some contribution to the damage.
Somebody else then the next day drove a forklift into the barrel. It doesn't matter if the top is a little weakened or not.
Right, exactly, right.
And just as we're all on the same page from Michael's original question, gross negligence, Shiur, is a level of liability, the basic level that you were referring to before for a shomer chinam.
Right, but in our definition of Shiur, do we make a chilek between gross negligence and negligence for Shiur? Simple negligence and gross negligence are both referred to as Shiur. We don't say Shiur means gross negligence. Oh, I was a little bit negligent and therefore I wasn't a Pesheya. We don't say that. We say Shiur means I was negligent, and we don't define negligence. I mean, obviously you have to have a minimum standard, but you don't have to have the maximum standard of being gross negligent. So I think that distinction may be germane in another case, but it's not germane to us here. Okay, so.
But the Chachamim obviously decided that there's no simple way to separate regular negligence and gross negligence.
Which is why for the most part in halacha we don't see a distinction made in the discussion of halacha.
It's impossible to define.
That's right.
Every situation, where's the border? Where do you cross from one into the other category?
If in fact, I would say that in cases, from a definitional standpoint, it could well be that Chazal looked at gross negligence as geneva. In other words, you did something so egregious that you pushed it into the next category. It's no longer just that you were negligent. You actually did something of conversion, which would be the next step, right? Because Misheh Shem Nesachar is chayiv on Geneva V'Aveda. So you may have pushed it over the edge into that next category, and it's no longer.
But obviously, they recognize that you couldn't separate the way we define negligence. There's too many variables to have a criteria to be able to do. It's not one; it's the other.
But there is a criterion in common law, and that is what would a reasonable person do in that situation? So would the most what would a normal action be, even if it was to a different extent? And that's, I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but that's how we define it. And
right, but when we say Shiur, when we say negligence, I think we are we're using that measure of reasonableness. In other words, oh, that doesn't look so bad. You didn't do something terrible, but you did something. You did something. That minimal something is called negligence. It doesn't have to be egregious. It has to be just something that you did you didn't use proper judgment. So in the case, let's say Menashe took the barrel and he instead of putting it off, in slot 11, where it would have been out of the way, he put it in slot 8, where people walk by all the time, and it's right in the thoroughfare. Is that reasonable that he used safety and precaution to make sure that someone wouldn't kick that barrel and maybe damage it or maybe roll it out of its place, and then it would be again? So that's the balance. Did he use his another? I mean, that's what you go to a dayan for. The dayan will tell you, yes, there was Shiur here or there was not Shiur. It's not necessarily going to be the two, literally, not me and Menashe. Menashe, what did you do? I just gave it to you into your rishus, so you're supposed to safeguard it for me. And you say, I did safeguard it. I put it with all my other barrels. And I said, no, but you put it in such a way that again, if I designated it to where it was supposed to be, it's all on me. But I put the designation on you. I said, you put it in, you have the skill and the responsibility. And then you put it in, and I come back later and it's damaged it. And you said, I did my best. I put it where I thought it wouldn't get harmed. But that was negligence because it wasn't reasonable, Michael. It didn't have. But
isn't that the distinction between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva? So
let's get to Rabbi Akiva in a minute. Yeah, but we're still by Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Yishmael's point is that the nifkat, has full responsibility and control of that item, which means that even if he converted it for some usage, which on the face of it would make him chayiv, as long as he rehabilitated himself and he took that questionable use and safeguarded it and put it where any normal person would say, this is safe, he's okay, because he didn't have to come to me for reshus to do what he did. That's really the point that we want to make on Rabbi Shmuel.
Can I just ask one follow-up question? Does that mean the contents only, or the barrel and the contents?
Barrel and the contents. The whole thing. The whole thing. But so again, the focus on Rabbi Shmuel is that in this particular case, he has total control of what happens from the beginning to the end. And even if he converted it along the way, which l'chaira you would think would break the chain and would make him somehow, if nothing else, contributorily negligent because he did something wrong, says the Mishnah, says the Gemara, Rabbi Shmuel says, nope, wipe out his contribution. He is completely potter. So let's go right in here and understand this. Now, how does he know this? Where did Rabbi Shmuel? He didn't make it up. The Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, Hagonif Taloch min ha'eder. If someone someone stole a sheep from a flock, right? Besela min hakis, or he went into my wallet and took out $1 or a $5 bill. L'mokam shegonav yachzer. Divrei Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel says, it says, V'hoshev esu aveda. You know what? I did the right thing. I returned the $1. I put the sheep back into the flock. No one is the wiser. You're okay. Nothing happened. So that's how far Rabbi Shmuel goes. And he says, I can self-correct. Just because I did something, I can self-correct. It's basically the principle of no harm, no foul. I took the $1. Nobody missed it. Nobody and said, someone robbed me. I put the $1 back. Good. So you see how liberal his view is, how much he's willing to return things to the status quo if nothing bad happens. And that's the Brisa. So if you steal a sheep, you should be chayiv. But wait a minute, I had charata here. Sheep is back in the flock. Who knew? The Bani Shalom knew, and I knew. Nobody else knew. But between you and me, Menashe, nothing ever happened. I never knew you took the taleh. I never knew that you took $1 out of my wallet. Doesn't matter. That's Rabbi Shmuel's view. Okay, it's important to understand that because Rabbi Shmuel does have a very open view of what you can do to correct yourself. Now we get to Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says, let's go to the top of Mem Aleph Amen Aleph. Rabbi Akiva says, Chorech das balim. What does Rashi say? Chorech das balim. Im lo hodiyam chayav v'achriyusam. If he didn't let him know, he's still chayiv to return in mace o nigna the midishakolek komle bershusei v'hashava below yidia lav hashavahi. Look at Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says that the heshiv is agzela is not the heshiv until you let the owner know that it was stolen and it's being returned. In other words, you have to have an active event of, oh, it was stolen. You have a responsibility, Menashe, to tell me, oh, by the way, I'm sorry to tell you, but someone stole your whatever, okay? But the good news is that it's back. So without that little give and take, according to Rabbi Akiva, it's still considered stolen, even if it's back in the flock. Imagine that. Everything is good. It was returned, but it's not the Heshiva or Aveda. It's stolen. And again, between us guys, does that make sense? I mean, again, you can argue that you had a responsibility to tell me what was going on. But I'm somewhere, chutz l'machane. I'm traveling somewhere. You have to tell me every little thing. I gave you latitude. Says Rabbi Akiva, no. The important thing is the Heshiv Aveda means the communication between the nifkad and the mafkid here in this particular place, or the case where someone stole the dollar out of the purse or the flip, whatever the case. So that's
Rabbi,
now the basic
is that a
machlokes.
distinction? Rabbi Yishmael says no communication is needed, and Rabbi Akiva says always a communication is needed.
Communication, right? That's a basic chilik in the machlokes.
But from the barrel's viewpoint, it doesn't know the difference whether
It doesn't know the difference.
in return. Why
The
doesn't
barrel doesn't
that,
know the difference.
why does that not mean something here?
Because we're talking about the interaction between me and Menashe and the fact that I entrusted him. So the Mishnah is trying to give us, and the Gemara is trying to give us a sense. What does that trust mean? Does the trust mean that Menashe can do whatever he wants with it, as long as at the end of the day I get mine back? It doesn't matter if someone ran it and went into all kinds of exciting adventures and this, that, and the other. But at the end of the day, the old cartoon, you gave it to the guy, and the guy ran, and the whole cartoon is about all the adventures that happened to this chayfetz, and it looks like at every twist and turn it's going to break. At the end, he has it. The balabos comes back and he says, "Here it is. Is everything okay?" "Sure, everything is fine. Here it is." Meantime, we all know that it went through all kinds of adventures. That's okay according to Rabbi Yishmael. But it's not okay according to Rabbi Akiva. According to Rabbi Akiva, you have got to delineate, and you've got to say, "Oh, by the way, such happened, but I'm now returning it to you safe and sound, and you have nothing to worry about." It's an interesting machlokes as to, Jay, why does it matter if at the end of the day you're giving it back? But the Gemara is giving us the insight between these Amoraim as to what the real responsibility is.
So the typical case is somebody is asked to watch my lawnmower, and in the meantime, he didn't do anything with it, but his neighbor needed to borrow it for 5 minutes. And
Right.
it comes back, and it's the same lawnmower, unless you say that it can't be the same because there has to be certain amount of wear and tear, no matter what.
That's the question, right? Right.
So
Or even if I myself, the shomer, used it to trim my hedge or something, not even somebody else. I used it a little bit, but again, it was a question of he didn't tell me not to use it. In other words, if I got a hasra, please make sure that this lawnmower stays pristine. I spent time rubbing it and cleaning it and everything else. He didn't say that. So basically, that's pshat l'tzarcho or l'tzarcha, whether he used it for his purpose or didn't use it for his purpose. That's really the thing. Okay, I know we're going to be limited on time, so let me just go a little bit further, and then we can pick up this very interesting conversation next week. So Frek the Gemara, an interesting kasha, top line of Memal. Rabbi Yishmael, if the Gemara says, "Hi mani Rabbi Yishmael." If Rabbi Yishmael is the man the Amar Vamishnah, my area lo yachtov. Why does here we have a question. The Mishnah, remember I pointed out to you that the Mishnah has a couple phases. The first phase is lo yachtov, that he didn't designate, right? And then it gives some explanations. And at the end, it gives us a situation of yachtov, where he did designate, right? So the Mishnah tells us both. Frek the Gemara, my ira lo yachtov. Why does the Mishnah even have to tell us lo yachtov? Afilu yachtov nami. According to Rabbi Yishmael, what difference does it make if the owner designated or didn't designate? So that the Mishnah has to tell us if he didn't designate such and such. But if he designated, then we have a different set of rules. What are you talking about? According to Rabbi Yishmael, if basically you have run of the place, then even if he was yachtov, even if I said to Menashe, I want my barrel to be on row 8, slot 11, only. Does that make a difference according to Rabbi Yishmael? You went ahead and you used it and put it back in row 8, slot 11. No, when you put it back into its original place, what did you do? You didn't have to consult me and tell me that you took it out, used it, rolled it, stepped on it, and put it back in row 8, slot 11. That's where it is. So according to Rabbi Shmuel, since the nifgad can basically return it to its place and never have to tell me, the owner, oh, by the way, it left row 8, slot 11, made the rounds, and then came back. Why does the Mishnah have to tell us yachtav and lo yachtav? It could have just told us yachtav. You know what? Even if the designation, I, Bedafka, wanted to be in that corner, if you go ahead and use it and do this, l'tzarcha, whatever, and put it back, and you have rishus to do that, because you have latitude, that's sufficient. So that's the kasha. The kasha is according to Rabbi Shmuel. Why does the Mishnah have to tell us lo yachtav? Just say yachtav. I would know lo yachtav if you told me that according to Rabbi Shmuel, you know what? You have total latitude to put it back, and if you put it back, you don't have to tell me a word. Do you have to tell? In that circumstance, would you even have to tell me that that you moved it? And let's say I said to you, do what you want with it. Of course, you could do what you want with it. Even if I tell you, don't do what you want with it, put it where I want it. Still, conversion doesn't mean conversion. As long as you put it back to where it was, and I'm not the wiser, according to Rabbi Shmuel, you have latitude to do that. That's the Gemara's kasha. According to Rabbi Shmuel, the Mishnah is out of balance because the Mishnah never has to tell us lo yachtav, once it tells us yachtav. So, says Rashi, the Makomahi, the Kivin, the Ba'otsa Makam Hachzira, Chazara Gemurahi. Look at that, Chazara Gemurahi. It is a complete Chazara as long as it's back in its place. And this Rashi refers to where he took it even with the owner's designation that it belongs in row 8, slot 11, then still you're okay. So that's the kasha. We're gonna have to stop here, I think, because but you understand now that what the ramifications are. Because if you're going to say that the halacha of this Mishnah is like Rabbi Shmuel, then the Gemara, then the Mishnah is superfluous. The Mishnah is telling us something that we don't need to know because it's almost like so. Okay, so let's quickly we can give the answer. So the Gemara says, "Lo maboya kama." No, the Mishnah wants to. Well, lo maboya is a statement of not only is it this, but it's something else. So lo maboya kama. The Mishnah is telling us lo maboya yachta. The makomahu ela afilu lo yachta. The lo makomahu lo be das bala. So the chiddush here is not what you think it is. You would think that the chiddush, why do you need lo yachtav if you have yachtav? Says, so the Gemara says, no, lo maboy yachtav, the makomahu. He doesn't have to tell us yachtav the makoma, but I feel lo yachtav, the lav makomahu, lo bin das balam. So if I ask you, which is more severe, according to Rabbi Shmuel, whether I told you to put it in a particular slot, or whether I gave you latitude. What would you think of on your own, without my telling you what in Rabbi Shmuel, what would be more egregious? What do you think is the bigger chiddush? The fact that I told you where to put it, or the fact where I gave you latitude where to put it? So the Gemara is telling us you might think that the bigger latitude, that the bigger chiddush is that even if I told you where to put it and you converted it and put it back, it's okay. Says the Gemara, no. It's one thing where I told you where to put it and you used it and then wound up putting it back. But even if I didn't tell you where to put it wherever you want, and you used it, you might have a havamina. You know what? I should really consult with the owner and tell the owner what I did here because he gave me latitude and I just played fast and loose. Says the Gemara that even where he did not designate, so that means that that you, Menashe, the Nifkat, can do what you want. Even in that case, you have latitude of not having to tell me where you put it, because I might have left thinking, oh, Menashe put it on line 8, slot 11, and when I come back, I find out it's in row 2, slot 9. How do they get there? Because you can do it without das Balen. You can do it on your own. That's what so the Gemara says, that's the Chiddush. The reason why you have to, the kasha is, why do you have to say both? Of course, if I know lo yachtav, I know yachtav. The answer is the Gemara, it's the other way around. You're telling us yachtav that he designated it, and you tell me, oh, but I took it away and put it back. I say, okay, that's okay, because you put it back where the owner knew it was in the first place. But even in a case where you put it somewhere because the owner gave you latitude, and then by the time the owner comes back, it's nowhere near there, it's somewhere else in the warehouse, you would think, oh, wait a minute, maybe he should have told me that he's moving it. The Chiddush is going to be Shmuel. You don't have to say a word because you have total latitude to take it and move it around. So again, in Rabbi Shmuel, everything goes. It doesn't matter whether it's yachtav, below yachtav, as long as it's intact and he comes back with it, everything's okay. So that's where we're gonna leave it right now, because then we're gonna get into Rabbi Akiva, and then we're gonna start seeing where the complications come. But in Rabbi Yishmael, who was very liberal and lenient in this whole approach, no problem. As long as you return me a whole barrel and you haven't broken my barrel, the fact that you may have gone through all kinds of adventures, my reshus, not my permission, not my permission, doesn't matter. The latitude is with the nifka. Okay, that's enough said, but now you're getting the picture that Rabbi Shmuel was very, very liberal in what he allowed the nifka to do here, as long as he returned it whole. Not so easy with Rabbi Akiva, and then we're going to see where the kashas come in. But for our purpose, that's where we are.
Yashkar.
Yeah.